All right, this week our topic is on prospecting and CRM or customer relationship management. When we think about selling in the sport industry, we often think right to that sales room, right? Hectic place, calls being made, phones ringing off the hook, sales being made, people celebrating. But the truth is, there is a lot of behind the scenes prep work that is done before a call is even placed to a potential customer. And that's going to be our focus this week to look at that behind the scenes work that sales departments do in order to prepare for the actual selling process, which we'll be getting to starting next week. So, again, the focus for our unit this week is on that prospecting piece and also how sport organizations manage data through customer relationship management systems. Okay, so when we talk about prospecting, we have to talk about this concept of lead generation. So, without great leads, it doesn't really matter what kind of sales culture you create or how many great salespeople you hire. And it may sound cliche, but it's true. Time is money in sales. So, you don't want your sales staff wasting time on leads that aren't going to go anywhere, right? You want to go where the interest is. So, in that regard, great leads are like gold to sales reps. And because of that, there are really two effective things that sport organizations can do to help or assist their sales teams be successful. And the first is just to provide ongoing training, right? And that makes sense. The more training you provide your staff, the more successful they're likely going to be. But the other thing that sport organizations can do to help their sales teams be effective is provide those great leads. There really is a lot of data out there that would suggest that the teams that focus on lead generation tend to do better in terms of revenue generation down the road. So it really is kind of an investment into your sales team that will ultimately help them be more successful. Okay, so some key terms that we want to make sure that we're aware of here as we have this conversation about prospecting. Let's start with lead. So a lead is basically just a list of names and contact information for potential buyers, right? So a lead is someone who may or may not have interest in purchasing tickets, and generally a lead is coupled with some kind of contact information, right? Now, in order for a lead to be someone worth calling, they have to be qualified, okay? So what we mean when we say qualified is there are essentially three different criteria that have to be met in order for a lead to be considered a prospect. Okay, so a prospect is someone who has a need, a financial capacity, and the authority to buy. So those are our three criteria, right? So someone who has a need or interest in the product being tickets, someone who has the financial ability to purchase that product, and then someone who has the authority to buy the product. Again, all three criteria need to be met in order for someone to be transitioned from a lead to a prospect. And just to give you an example of why this is, think about it. A 13-year-old may have an interest in buying tickets for a game, right? So that 13-year-old may call up a sales rep and say, "Hey, I'm a big fan of the team. I want to come to games." But it's likely that that 13-year-old does not have the financial ability to purchase those tickets, nor do they have the authority to actually make that decision. So this is why all three of these criteria need to be met in order for a lead to be considered a prospect. Again, time is money. Want to make sure that a lead meets these criteria before you actually take the time to call them. Now, can someone have a need for tickets but not have an interest in the team? This is always an interesting question that I pose to students. And the answer is yes, someone could absolutely have a need but not an interest, right? We have to get beyond our traditional way of viewing fandom, right, as we're thinking about actually selling this product. Not everyone that buys tickets or who is a decision maker is a traditional fan in the way that we typically think of a fan, someone like our Vikings friend here. The truth is, a lot of tickets that are purchased from a corporate perspective, right? That B2B sales that we talked about last week. And because of that, sports organizations invest a lot of time and energy selling to those corporations. And you can see that, the vast majority of corporations that are buying tickets aren't doing so because they're a fan, right? They're doing so because it serves a business need, right? It helps them further their business goals. It may help them entertain clients. It may help them reward their employees. But just keep in mind when we think about classifying leads into prospects that not every single one of those potential leads is going to fit our traditional view of fandom, and that someone could have a need to purchase tickets but not necessarily have an interest. So that's just something to keep in mind as you think about this kind of background research that is being done or preparation that's being done. Okay, so as we think about this process of a lead transitioning into a prospect and then ultimately a customer, I think it's a good way to think about it is through this sales funnel. Okay, so you can see this is basically just an inverted pyramid, and it shows that there are 3 stages to this process, right? And essentially, different things are happening at each stage, right? So, very first stage is we have a list of leads, right? So, sport organization obtains a list of leads. They might generate that list, they might purchase that list. We'll talk later about how there are different ways to obtain leads. But stage 1 is just getting the leads, generating them, and then assigning them to your sales reps, okay? And of course, that's going to be the point in the process where you have the largest list, right? Because you still have not filtered or qualified that list yet. That's going to be stage 2, where essentially you look at those leads and determine whether or not they meet those 3 criteria that we outlined. So this is the qualifying process. And obviously the pyramid's getting smaller here, right? Because not every single one of those leads is going to be meeting those 3 criteria. So now we have narrowed down our leads to a list of potential prospects. And then of course, stage 3 is going to be to actually convert those prospects into customers, right? And again, this is going to be the smallest part of our pyramid because even if someone meets all 3 criteria, and becomes a prospect, that doesn't mean we're going to get them to sign on the bottom line, right? We still have to go through the process of converting those prospects into a sale, which can take time. So this is the sales funnel process of transitioning a lead to a prospect and then ultimately to a customer. All right, so I mentioned earlier that there are different types of leads, right? Not every lead is going to be classified in the same way based on the information that we have. So we'll start on the left and work our way to the right here. So hot leads are basically people who have contacted the sport organization and they are proactively seeking to buy tickets, right? So hot leads are the best kinds of leads, right? Because these are people that are calling the team and basically saying, here's my credit card number, right? I want to purchase tickets. So there's not a whole lot of work that has to be done from the sales rep's perspective if they get a hot lead, right? It's just getting as much information as possible and making sure that you finalize the sale. Warm leads, if we move our way to the right here, with a warm lead, basically a connection has already been made with the person prior to the seller making that initial sales call, right? So some kind of link between the team and the individual exists, which makes them a warm lead, right? So this could be a single game buyer, right? Someone who has purchased tickets in the past, so we know that at least there's some interest in the team. This could be a referral from our current season ticket holder. We'll talk more about referrals later on. And so basically, a warm lead is someone that has that connection point. And so, it's more likely that someone who's classified as a warm lead is going to purchase than, say, a cold lead, because we know that there is that connection point and that hopefully they are meeting the 3 criteria that we have laid out. Finally, a cold lead. This is, of course, the least preferred type of lead. Essentially, a cold lead is someone who is on a list and we have no information about them and there's seemingly no connection point between the team and this person. Cold lead is essentially where that term cold call comes from, right? You're calling someone that may or may not have any awareness or knowledge of the team and trying to convert that into a sale. And again, obviously this is the least preferred type of lead to have. Now, does that mean that a cold lead can't turn into a warm lead or hot lead? Not necessarily, but it's certainly less likely. And again, in terms of time, We want to make sure that we're focusing energy on those warm and hot leads that are more likely to transition to a prospect and sale. Okay, wanted to give you an example here of how teams tend to gather data on warm or hot leads and then continue to follow up. So this is an example for me. I had contacted the White Sox back in March of 2011 about purchasing club seats for a game. And ultimately, talked to the sales rep, but ended up purchasing tickets through a secondary party because I got a better deal. But obviously, I was considered a hot lead at the time, right? I had called up the team directly and said, hey, I'm interested in purchasing X number of tickets. And you can see that was March of 2011 that I made that call. And in May of 2017, I'm still getting emails from this sales rep that I had talked to and had been probably classified as a hot lead at the time. So they continue to reach out to me every year, just in the off chance that I might be ready to buy at that point. So it shows you kind of the investment that teams make once you are considered to be a hot lead. Okay, so as we talk about this prospecting in terms of ticket sales, we have to talk about data and information. Basically, the more you know, the better you're able to classify and qualify leads, right? So the more information, the better anytime we are talking to or looking at a list of potential leads. And generally, if we have more information, we have the ability to qualify, right? So the less information we have, the less likely we're going to be able to actually qualify those leads to prospects. So let's think for a minute about the type of information or data we give up as consumers when we purchase tickets. So, just think about all of these different ways in which you can purchase tickets for a sporting event. Obviously each scenario is different in terms of the information you're being asked to give up. But ultimately, every point of contact you make with the sport organization or even a secondary market is going to require you to provide some kind of information, right? Whether it's, you go to the box office, you're definitely giving your credit card information. If you go to the team website, you're probably having to provide more info, right? Your name, probably your email, probably your phone number, right? And then if you go through a secondary market, you're giving even more information, and so on and so forth. So, there is a rationale behind this, right? The teams aren't just, trying to waste your time and make you give a bunch of information. They're actually gathering that data and filing it away into a CRM system, which we're going to talk about later on in the second half of this lecture. But that data is so valuable to those teams because it allows them to determine the type of lead you are and whether or not you could potentially be a prospect and then customer. And data isn't just important for sales reps trying to sell tickets. It's certainly that. But it's also important for us to realize that data can be helpful for sport marketers too, right? And I'll use an example from the golf course that I used to work at. So we would host these ladies' night out events once a month at the golf course and, essentially sell tickets to these events. And you can see here, this was the sign-up sheet that you had to complete before the actual event, right? And we were gathering data every time someone signed up for this event. You can see we're getting name, email, address, so on and so forth, obviously payment information. So again, we required this information before they actually came to the course for the event. And what we would do is we would go into our CRM system, we would input all this info before the actual event, and then once they arrived to the event, we could look up their name and tag any purchases into their account. So maybe they bought a hat or a set of golf balls before the event. So now we can track their buying behavior over time. We would also take photos during the event, and then afterwards we'd have their email address so we could email the photos. So it was another connection point for us and, give them a keepsake from the event. I use this as an example because I think it shows you how that data is not just important for generating revenue or transitioning someone from a lead to a prospect. It also allows marketers to really track key information about a current buyer and to hopefully generate future sales because of that information. So this isn't just something that is local to ticket sales. Data is important to all aspects of a sport organization. Okay, so as we're talking about leads, we have to talk about the most common sources of leads for sports ticket offices. So basically, where are they getting these leads that we're talking about? And obviously, every organization is different in terms of where they might look to gather leads. But we're going to highlight some common sources of leads, and this is based on a study by Irwin, Sutton, and McCarthy from 2008. Okay, so I'll do a quick overview here, and then I'm going to highlight some examples. So obviously, a common source of lead is past ticket purchasers, right? We talked about single game buyers before. And if you think back to our conversation from last week, we looked at the escalator, right? The frequency escalator, where the people at the very bottom of the escalator were those single game buyers. But this is obviously an interesting group of people, right? Because they obviously have an interest in the team and the financial ability to purchase tickets, right? So past game buyers are a great source of leads. Using contest entries or promotions is another great way to generate leads if you're a sport organization. So I'll show you an example here. The Nationals a few years ago partnered with the Virginia Lottery, and they launched these MLB lottery tickets. So, fans could go to the local gas station and purchase a Nationals lottery ticket, which was a great partnership, a great branding opportunity. But the way that they were actually able to generate leads was the promotion was any losing ticket. So if you didn't win the lottery, which was pretty much everyone, right? Those people could turn in their losing tickets to the team, and they were going to be put in a drawing for a second chance drawing, right? Now, in order to turn in those tickets, they also had to provide a bunch of information, right? So name, phone, email, address. So this gave the team thousands of potential leads, right? Of people that obviously have an interest in their product. So that was a good example of using promotions or giveaways. And, people are most likely to provide information if they think it's in exchange for a potential prize or some kind of value. Okay. Online surveys are another common source of leads for sports organizations. I'm sure you've been sent an online survey at some point from a team. And of course, one goal of that survey is to gather important data, right, that they might use in other aspects of their business operations. But a secondary motive for those online surveys is gathering information that could be used to determine if someone's a good lead or not. Okay, I'm going to pause here and we'll talk about referrals in the second set of lecture.